Okay, so you should have already set up your CodePen account. If not, you should go back and watch the first video in this playlist. But so far, this is where we should be right now. You should have already gotten a new CodePen open. If for some reason you don't have this screen and you need to get a new CodePen, log into your account and you can always go to your avatar. You can always also, just by the way, if you're coming fresh to this, you can go to codepen.io. Okay, and you should come into here, and if you're not logged in, of course log in, and once you log in, you'll be able to create something and save it directly to your account. So you can always go to create new pen, and that's how we got to this screen. It'll open a new screen that looks like this. If for some reason you need to do something from your CodePen, so let me close that other window. If you are inside of a new pen and you need to get to your dashboard for some reason, you can always click on your avatar up here and you can click on your dashboard. I'm going to right click it and say to open it in a new tab. And you can always get to your dashboard from there. And I haven't created any pens yet because I haven't done anything to save this. And meaning I also, like, I haven't actually typed anything in it. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do though is we are going to work just in HTML for today. We're not going to mess with JavaScript, so I can sort of close that up a little bit, and we're not going to mess with the CSS for today. So I can close that up a little bit so that we've got maximum space over here for HTML. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit this, so I'm going to name it, and I'm going to call this paragraphs and headings. Okay, and you can do that too if you want to follow along. And so I'm going to show you how you can just use this to create some paragraphs and headings. Now, the one thing that I want to really quickly explain to you, if you watched the videos that were the lectures that talked about required parts of the HTML document, you might be thinking, well, are we going to be typing, the doc type and the HTML tags and the head tag and the title tag and the body tag? The answer to that for right now is no. We're just going to get up and running with the kinds of things that would go inside the body tag. And if you remember from what I said in my tutorial, everything that's in the body is actually going to be what shows and displays in the viewport. So let's just do something. I'm going to write, this is some text, okay? And then if I do that, you see that it starts to show up down here. And it's going to show me in kind of like an almost live preview mode, like it's going to immediately start to change things as I type, so that you can see what you're doing up here is actually affecting what's down here in the browser viewport. Now, if I wanted to wrap a paragraph tag around that, I could do it one of two ways. I could either start to type this P tag, right? And this right here, this little box that's popping up, this is what I was telling you about that's code hinting. Code hinting is going to be, or they call it autocomplete, but code hinting is where you start to type and it gives you some code hints so that maybe you could cursor through some of these and say, yeah, I want to use a P tag. All right, and then it just helps you figure out how to type some of your code, right? And then I could come over here and I could do an ending P tag, for instance, and I can just hit the return key to commit to that. And then it will, show me the way that it's going to look as a P tag. Now, the thing that you need to know, and I just want to go ahead and show you something, is if I click save, all right, once I hit save, you'll notice that I get some new options now. First of all, the fork showed up because now I actually have something that I can fork off of. And the other thing is down below, I now get a full screen option. I get delete, I get a share button, I get the export button, an embed button, and collections, right? And so one of the things I could do is I could say create new collection and add. And the collection that I'm going to make is I'm just going to call this practice lessons, and you might want to do this as well. And then that way, any kind of like goofy little thing, like if you're just experimenting in the beginning of the class where you're learning how to do something with a paragraph tag or a heading tag or whatever, it can go down here in practice lessons. And you can say these are practice lessons format 125 or something like that. Okay, and then create it, and then now this is going to be added to that, so that anytime I want to be able to really quickly jump to my practice lessons, I can always go into my dashboard and I can look in my collections, click practice lessons, and then it'll automatically filter this lesson for me. So that was one way I could have done that. Let's just get rid of this paragraph tag. Okay, and another thing that I can do is I can highlight this, and this is really cool. If I highlight the text and I think, you know, I've already typed the text, now I just need to wrap it in some tags. So I want this to be a paragraph, for instance. I can come down here to this little button. On mine, it's a little command key. On Windows, it should be like a little control key. And right here, I want you to look at where it says HTML specific, and underneath it, it has a shortcut that says wrap with, and I want you to pay attention to the shortcut keys. So mine, for instance, is this little flower looking key is my command key, and then I would also hold down this, the arrow key stands for the shift key. So I would hold down command, shift, and the letter A. All right, and so if I want to highlight this text right here, I would hold down command, shift, and the letter A, and then it pops up and it says wrap with, and I could just say P, so that it knows it's a paragraph tag, and then automatically it will wrap it in a paragraph, which is pretty cool. Now, if you don't want to use that at first, that's fine. The other way that we could start to type a paragraph tag is we can just start typing our left angle bracket, P, and it starts to give you these hints, and at this point, if I just hit the return key, it doesn't do anything, and there's a reason for that. I'm not going to go into why right now, because it has to do with attributes and stuff. We're not going to get into that just yet, but it doesn't know if I'm going to add more stuff inside of this tag, so it doesn't try to complete it for me. So if I put the ending angle bracket right there, and then I start typing again, and I put the / so that it understands, you want to end this P tag because that's the next thing that would be ended. I can go ahead at this point and I can just hit the return key and I can commit to it, and it will auto-complete for me, which is really nice. So that's the way that the auto-complete works. It works better whenever you start to type the ending tag with this / in here, right? And so anything that I want to be inside that paragraph, I would then put my cursor in between the open P tag and the ending P tag, and I could say this, you know, is some paragraph text. Okay. The other thing that you can do too, let's just jump over to a new window, and I can go to do a search for Lorem Ipsum, and the very first hit that I get is just the regular old Lorem Ipsum generator. If you want something that's a little bit more fun, you can also go to something that's called Meet the Ipsums. All right, and if you go to Meet the Ipsums, it gives you other dummy text that is more fun than just the regular dummy Latin. So there's like cat ipsum, there's coffee ipsum. Let's look at cat ipsum. We'll go to the silly thing, but it gives you something that maybe is a little bit more fun for you to look at. So you can let's leave the title out. We'll just say start with cat ipsum dolor. We'll have one standard scoop. That's just for one paragraph. All right, and it gives you all this information, and then we'll just say make muffins, right? And it gives you a bunch of gobbledygook, all right? And so I'm just going to take some of it so that it's easy to grab, all right? Anyway, but the point is you're just grabbing some dummy text that you can go and paste into here so it doesn't just say this is some paragraph text, all right? I'll go ahead and leave that first line so I know what it is, and then you see here that it automatically updates it on my screen, which is great. So that's a paragraph. That's the way it's going to show up. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can come up here, and let's say that you hit the enter key a couple of times, and let's say that we want to have heading level 1. Okay, now there's some different ways that I can try to create a heading level 1. As I mentioned before, we can either highlight this, all right, and then if you remember from our little shortcut, it's on my computer, since it's a Mac, I use the Command key. On Windows, it'd be a different key. So on mine, it's Command Shift A. All right, so if I highlight this and I say Command Shift the letter A, I can say H1 for a heading level 1, and it's going to automatically wrap it with that, which is kind of nice. And then you see down here in the live preview, automatically it shows me my heading level 1. As you saw before, I could have typed that in some different ways. I could also have it look just like this, right? And you'll see that down here below in this view, it doesn't look any different. Whether I have it on one line or I have it nested in a triple line. Okay, so if I wanted to copy this, I could copy this and come down below, and I can change this to heading level 2, and I need to make sure I change the ending tag to 2, and let's change that here. And then you can see how it starts to visually style it based on just default browser styling. Now, when I say styling, I'm not adding styles. You should know that the browser itself will have default styles that it applies. And if you remember back from the lecture, basically it's reading these semantic tags, because remember, semantic tags mean that these natively have inherent meaning, that an H1 is a heading level 1. It's the most important heading. So therefore the browser, to help us visually be able to read it, in the absence of additional styling, it's going to automatically make it bigger and bolder, all right, on purpose, so that we can see it better, all right. Heading level 2 is a little bit smaller, but it's still bigger and bolder than, say, the paragraph text. Anyway, so we could continue doing this. Let's type it a little differently. I want you to get used to typing these pieces of code differently. So we'll start with an open angle bracket. We'll type H3, and I'll go ahead and close it right there. I'll end it, and then we'll type, heading level 3, and then I'll start to type my ending H3, and then you see it wants to auto-complete. If I hit the enter key, it's going to commit to that end H3, so I don't have to type the whole thing. And the thing that's also kind of nice about using autocomplete is that it helps you prevent mistyping something, and getting confused because maybe you didn't end something properly. So that's kind of nice. And then you can go all the way down to like heading level 4, 5, 6, right? So let's just do that really quickly, and we can see what these different ones look like. I'll just paste these in. I'm just going to manually change them really quickly. So that's 4, that's 5, 5, that's 6. And I need to go back and remember to change these so that I can see what's being properly reflected on the screen. And then if I want to see more of the browser, I can do something like this. The other thing, don't forget, that you can do is I can click on change view up here, and I can jump over to this view, which is actually going to be fine for what we're doing here. Oops, let's stay here. It's going to be just fine because I don't have, a bunch of JavaScript and CSS windows that I have to worry about. So I actually can see what I'm doing pretty well here. Okay. Now, this is kind of weird without, in the absence of styling. It's sort of strange that the heading levels 5 and 6 actually get smaller than the paragraph text. So, but the point is that, you want these heading levels to always be in the correct order. You would never, for instance, do something like, let's cut this out. You would never do something like this. You would never have this order, what used to happen years and years ago is that if somebody decided that they wanted something to look smaller, they would just say, hey, let's use an H6 because the browser is going to make it smaller. Well, now that we have CSS, I can tell this H6 to be any size I want. And so you want to make sure that you nest it properly and you don't put them out of order. Okay, so that's something that's useful to know. Now, the other thing that you might be able to do, say like with headings, is that you might have a heading 1, and then you might have a bunch of other things later that are like heading 2s throughout the page. And you'll notice also, I want you to pay attention to something, is where I have heading level 2, and then in the next line where it's got the paragraph, you'll see that I've got a couple of spaces inside my HTML. You see where I'm toggling my cursor back and forth over here. And if I get rid of that space, you'll notice that absolutely nothing changed here in the display view. Remember, I told you that white space outside of these tags does not matter. I could do something like this, and it does not matter over here. Something else I could do is I could put a whole bunch of spaces here after the word this. In fact, I could hit the tab key, right? I could hit the return key. And you'll notice that because I am still outside of this actual tag, I mean, I'm nested inside of the tag, but I'm not like literally inside of the angle brackets, right? Whenever I am doing something like this where I've got all this extra space, it's still the browser basically disregards all that extra white space, and it says, oh, what you really intended was just a single space, and it will do that. There is a tag that we'll get to later that will allow you to see all of that white space, but it's the only tag that will do that. It's actually called the pre tag. It stands for pre-formatted. But for heading levels and for paragraphs, this is the way you could look at this. Another thing that you could do is you could say, all right, well, let's just make a copy of this heading level 2 and this paragraph. I'm going to copy that into my clipboard. You can also right click and you can say copy, right? And then I can come down here afterwards and I can paste it again so that you see that now I have another heading level 2 with another paragraph. And just so you can see that it's not exactly the same, I could go and remove a little bit so that it starts with the word drool here. All right, so it looks like a different paragraph. So let's just say here we'll say first instance of, right? And then down here we can say second instance. And you'll see that these are correctly nested. Now you might say, well, wait a second, you know, I thought that we had to have a heading level 3 come next. Well, no, not necessarily. The way that the heading levels nest, here, let me open this up a little bit more. The way that the heading levels nest, it's really important to understand is that I can have an H2 that is the heading that comes before some other stuff, and then I can have another H2, and that is just fine. What I can't have is I can't jump from an H1 to an H3, you know, for instance. What I could also do is I could come underneath this paragraph tag and I could have another subheading within this. I could say H3. This is another subheading of first instance or something. All right, so we could call it something like that. All right, and then I can end that H3, and then I could have some more paragraph text or something, right? We can do another paragraph and say, this is some other paragraph text, okay? And then we'll do an end P right there. We've got some paragraphs with some properly nested heading levels, okay? And so you can kind of mess around with this and just play with it. And these are some examples of how you can work with heading levels and with paragraph tags.